Greetings, Pokey fans! Michael here, and new hat! Available now! Also, the plushie is back! MandJTVmerch.com. Welcome to the most requested episode of Pokemon Types Then vs. Now, my series where I go over the history and changes that a certain type has gone through over the course of the main series Pokemon games. This episode is for the Psychic type, the most severely nerfed type in Pokemon history. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and let's start with Generation 1, a generation where the Psychic type was the most overpowered type of all time. More overpowered than Dragon was and Fairy is. It was basically unstoppable. And why was that? Well, that's because this was its type chart. You may immediately notice that it only has one weakness, and Ghost is not that weakness. Nowadays, Ghost is super effective against Psychic, but back in Gen 1, Psychic was immune to it. It's believed that Ghost was intended to be super effective against Psychic back then, since in Red and Blue, an NPC in the Saffron Gym says that Psychic types only fear bugs and ghosts. This statement was removed in Yellow though, which further enforces the fact that they intended to make Psychic weak to Ghost, but screwed up. But since they couldn't change the type chart mid-generation, they're just like, oh, never mind, just remove this now incorrect statement. But even if Ghost was strong against Psychic, it wouldn't have mattered. The only fully evolved Ghost type Pokemon was Gengar, which was also a Poison type, which was weak to Psychic. And the only Ghost type attack that did Ghost type damage was the very weak Lick, since the other two were Confuse Ray and Nightshade. So Psychic only had one weakness, and that weakness was to the Bug type. However, if you saw my Bug Types Then vs. Now video, then you know that the Bug type in Gen 1, well, it was completely useless. The attacks were very bad and were barely known by any Pokemon. Certainly not the actually strong Bug types Scyther and Pinsir, two Bug type Pokemon that learned literally zero Bug type attacks. Beedrill got both Pin Missile and Twin Needle, but it was both weak and a Poison type, which is weak to Psychic. Therefore, while the Psychic type technically had one weakness, it effectively had zero. But it wasn't just overpowered on defense. It was also only resisted by one type, the Psychic type, which means you could not defend against it without using a Psychic type Pokemon of your own. But in addition to its excellent type matchup chart, Psychic type Pokemon had an advantage in the stat department too. In Gen 1, Special Attack and Special Defense were just one stat, the Special stat, which meant if a Pokemon had a high number in just that one stat, they effectively had a high number in two stats. The Psychic type Pokemon is sort of the mascot for the special side of things, so because of that, a lot of Psychic type Pokemon had really good special stats, meaning they both hit hard and took special damage really well. Mew and Starmie had 100. Hypno had 115, Exeggutor had 125, Alakazam had 135, and of course Mewtwo had 154. All of these Pokemon not only hit really hard, but all the special category types didn't do much damage to them either. The fully evolved Psychic type Pokemon introduced in Gen 1 were Alakazam, Slowbro, Hypno, Exeggutor, Starmie, Mr. Mime, Jinx, Mewtwo, and Mew. Their average base stat total under the current system, which I'm doing since it makes the numbers easier to compare to other generations, is around 524, which is very high. If you remove the legends of Mew and Mewtwo, the average is 491, which is still very high, meaning the best type also had a lot of really strong Pokemon. A ton of Psychic moves were introduced in Gen 1, which is not the case for most types. A lot of the types, it was like, here's 3 bad moves, do your best. The majority of them are status moves, since Psychic powers let you do all sorts of fancy things, I guess. And to this day, the Psychic type has more non-damaging moves than any other type. Of all the Gen 1 moves though, Psychic was and still is the most useful and widely used Psychic type attack. It has the dumbest name though. Go, Charizard, use fire. Go, Pikachu, use electric. Haha, it is I, Grunty boy. Lovely, what do you want?
Remember how
you introduced me to Wondershare Filmora 10, the sponsor of today's video, and how I've been using it to edit videos for a while now? I do remember, specifically how most of the videos you edit are very rude to me, but I am still glad you're using Filmora. Filmora is perfect for both beginners and experienced editors, and it includes preset templates like effects, filters, and transitions, and it even has tons of royalty-free music so you can avoid copyright claims. But why are you bringing it up to me now? But have you tried their newest version yet, with features like auto highlight and audio normalization? Oh yeah, I have. Auto highlight is really cool. All you have to do is insert a file, analyze it, then export it. Filmora will automatically trim down a long file into a highlight reel of the best moments, which is super useful for long recordings of gameplay like I make. It's ideal for making YouTube shorts or TikToks, but still, I don't understand why you're asking me about all this. Well, all right, Sir Impatient Pants. I'm here for a variety of reasons. The first of which is that Filmora is running their 3-day Filmora Fest. By clicking the second link in the description below, the first one being the link to download Filmora 10, we can enter to win prizes like a MacBook Pro 13, and also attend webinars to grasp video editing skills from professionals. Also, anyone who leaves a comment on this video with their impressions of the newest version of Filmora 10, which they can try for free, will be entered to win a 1-year free license. Well, that's great, but what does that have to do with me? I want to team up. By combining our efforts, we can exponentially increase our chances of winning the prizes. Well, who gets the prize if we win? Well, me. And what do I get? A hug. Get out. Fine. Miss out on what would have been a great hug. Ta-ta, or whatever. Anyways, make sure to download Filmora 10 using the link in the description below, and comment what you think of the newest version. Thanks so much to them for sponsoring, but now, back to the video. All psychic attacks were classified as special moves in Gens 1 through 3. However, even after the physical special split in Gen 4, all psychic attacks introduced in Gens 1 through 3 stayed as special attacks in Gen 4 onward. Psychic is one of only 2 types to keep its classification for all of its attacks. The other one is the fighting type. All of them were physical moves in Gens 1 through 3, but they stayed physical moves in Gen 4 onward, the moves that were introduced in Gens 1 through 3. The Psychic Specialist of Gen 1 was Sabrina, the Saffron City gym leader, and she's consistently been the toughest Kanto gym leader throughout all of her appearances. That's because the Psychic type is still really good in Kanto-specific playthroughs even after the nerfs it got. That's because there's no dark types in the original 150, except for the Alola forms you can get in Let's Go. The only ghost types are the Gengar line, which are weak to Psychic, or the Alolan Marowak in Let's Go. And the bug types, well, they did get better, but they still weren't that good in Fire Red and Leaf Green. The Psychic type was truly overpowered in Generation 1, and the developers knew it. In a 2000 issue of Nintendo Power, Ken Sugimori is quoted saying, "Psychic Pokemon seemed to dominate in the previous Pokemon game, so we needed to come up with new Pokemon and types to make Pokemon Gold and Silver more balanced." So that's what they did, and they were pretty severe about it. Starting in Gold and Silver, this was the new type chart for the Psychic type, and it remains like this to this day. Ghost was changed to being super effective against Psychic instead of doing nothing to it, as it was always intended to be. The new Steel type resists Psychic, and the new Dark type is not only super effective against Psychic, but is also immune to it. Psychic went from 1 weakness, 1 immunity, and only being resisted by 1 type, to having 3 weaknesses, being resisted by 2, and not being able to touch 1. That is easily the most negative single generation type chart change any type has ever experienced. It's also worth noting that the 2 types intended to handle Psychic in Gen 1, Bug and Ghost, got better just on their own in Gen 2. They didn't get good, but they got Mega Horn and Shadow Ball on a couple Pokemon. Dark types were the main way to handle Psychic types. In addition to the type matchup changes, the special stat was split into Special Attack and Special Defense, which meant a lot of Psychic type Pokemon experienced a nerf to either their Special Attack or Special Defense. Alakazam's Special Defense went from effectively 135 to just 85. Hypno's Special Attack was dropped down from 115 to 73. Mewtwo's special defense fell from 154 to 90. Some of them were actually buffed, like Slowbro, but for most of them, it was a drop. These changes to the Psychic type from Gen 1 to Gen 2 are the most severe nerf any type has ever received. It needed to happen, but still, like, wow. The new fully evolved Psychic type Pokemon in Gen 2 were Xatu, Espeon, Slowking, Unknown, Wobbuffet, Girafarig, Lugia, and Celebi. Also, there was the new baby Pokemon Smoochum. Aside from the legendaries, Espeon and Slowking were the most useful. Wobbuffet is a gimmick fighter, Girafarig and Xatu are somewhat underwhelming, and Unknown is completely useless. Literally, it only learns hidden power. Like, why? Only 2 new psychic moves were added, Future Sight and Mirror Coat. Mirror Coat is the special counter equivalent, but Future Sight became the new strongest psychic attack. It takes 2 turns to hit though, so Psychic is still the de facto move. The Psychic specialist was Will, the first member of the Indigo Elite Four. Sabrina also returns though, as a post-game gym leader in the Kanto region. So Gen 2 was really rough on the Psychic type Pokemon. It needed to happen, it was not balanced, and it became a much more balanced type as a result of the Gen 2 nerfs. Going forward though, it would stay about the same. It was a more balanced type now, so they just kind of kept it that way. However, I guess they kind of felt bad for nerfing it so severely in Gen 2, because even though it doesn't get really any major buffs or nerfs going forward, it gets a lot of attention, mainly in the amount of moves and Pokemon it's given. Gen 3 introduced more Psychic Pokemon than any other generation. The fully evolved ones being Gardevoir, Medicham, Grumpig, Lunatone, Solrock, Claydol, Chimecho, Metagross, Latias, Latios, Jirachi, and Deoxys. And I should also note Wynaut was introduced since its fully evolved form was not introduced in Gen 3. Of these, Gardevoir, Metagross, Latias, and Latios would go on to make the biggest impacts. The others are either not as impressive, cough cough, Chimecho is useless, or they were mythicals, Jirachi and Deoxys, and therefore not allowed in most formats. Metagross was particularly nasty due to being the first, and only to this day, Psychic type pseudo-legendary. Metagross is also the last non-Dragon type pseudo-legendary introduced, the only other one being Tyranitar the generation before. Which honestly I think is kind of disappointing. I'd like to see more non-Dragon type pseudo-legendaries introduced in the future. The addition of Latios, Latias, Jirachi, and Deoxys officially made Psychic the most abundant type for legendary and mythical Pokemon, passing up Flying. It keeps this crown all the way to the present day. So even though it's no longer as overpowered as it was in Gen 1, the devs clearly associate the type with great power. Gen 3 also introduced quite a lot more Psychic type moves. The most notable are Calm Mind, an excellent boosting move still widely used today, Extrasensory, a somewhat inferior Psychic in my opinion, Skill Swap, a potentially useful move in double battles, and Trick, a move used for moving around held items. As you can see, the list of Psychic status moves continues to grow. The Psychic Specialist, or Specialists, were Tate and Liza, the Moss Deep City gym leader pair, the first gym leader to utilize double battles. Next up is Gen 4, which introduced the physical special split, making it so moves were classified on an individual basis rather than what type the move was. Overall, this did not impact the Psychic type very much. As I mentioned earlier, all the Psychic attacks introduced prior to Gen 4 were special and stayed special. Plus, there were very few Psychic Pokemon that had higher physical attack than special attack. The only ones with higher physical attack were Metagross and Medicham. Medicham technically has equal attack and special attack, but its ability Pure Power makes its attack twice as good. Metagross was already really good and only got better, and Medicham, well, it still wasn't that great, but it got better thanks to physical Psychic moves. Speaking of moves, once again, a lot more Psychic moves were added. But literally all but 2 were status moves, the most impactful being Trick Room, a move that swaps speed calculations and defines entire competitive metagames to this day. The 2 moves that were not status moves were Psycho Cut and Zen Headbutt, 2 of the only 4 regular physical Psychic moves to ever be introduced, both of which are still weaker than Psychic. Clearly it still pays to be a special attacking Psychic type. The new fully evolved Psychic type Pokemon added were Bronzong, Gallade, another physical Psychic type, Uxie, Mesprit, Azelf, and Cresselia. further increasing Psychic's lead as the most abundant legendary type. They also added the new babies of Mime Jr. and Chingling, and just, why did they make Chingling? Why? Why on earth would you give a new baby form to a Pokemon whose fully evolved form is already extremely weak? Chimecho had a base stat total of 425 in Gen 4. It's got a better one now, 455, still not good, but 425 and they thought it needed a baby? Of the fully evolved ones, all of them are at least respectably useful, but Cresselia became the true competitive monster. It just doesn't die. The Gen 4 Psychic Specialist was the Elite Four member Lucian, and he, like most of the Sinnoh Pokemon League, had his ace change from Diamond and Pearl to Platinum, his strongest Pokemon going from Bronzong to Gallade. Gen 5 continued the trend of Gen 3 and Gen 4, not doing a whole lot for Psychic type's overall viability, but just adding a ton more Pokemon and a ton more moves. The new fully evolved Psychic type Pokemon were Swoobat, Zenmo Darmanitan, Sigilyph, Gothitelle, Reuniclus, Behem, and Meloetta's Aria form. Of these, I believe Gothitelle and Reuniclus are the best, with Sigilyph a bit behind. The new Psychic moves were once again abundant. Most of the status moves are pretty useless, with the exception of Ally Switch and Heal Pulse, which can be useful in double battles. Heart Stamp was a new physical psychic move, only learnable by Miltank, the Swoobat line, and the Jinx line. Love Disc would get it later, and Pikachu and Jirachi could get it by an event. But it was weaker than Psycho Cut and Zen Headbutt, so it didn't really matter. There were several new special attacks, but the most important was Psyshock, a move that checked the target's physical defense, giving special attacking psychic types a way to get around specially defensive walls. Stored power requires boosting to be good, Synchro Noise is completely useless, and Psystrike is stronger Psyshock, but only for Mewtwo. The psychic specialist was Caitlyn, previously the little girl from the Gen 4 Battle Frontier Battle Castle, now grown up and a member of the Unova Elite Four. Then came Generation 6, which introduced the first new type to the game since Generation 2, this new type being the Fairy type. And the Fairy type didn't really impact the Psychic type at all. They have no interactions whatsoever. The main impact Gen 6 had on the Psychic type was adding some absurd Mega Evolutions. Mega Alakazam, 2 Mega Mewtwo's, Mega Gardevoir, Mega Medicham, Mega Latios, Mega Latias, Mega Slowbro, Mega Metagross, and Mega Gallade. Most of these are very overpowered, and the ones that aren't very overpowered are simply very good. The Mega Mewtwo's are the most notable ones though. They are tied with Mega Rayquaza for the highest base stat total of any usable Pokemon, with an absurd 780. As for the regular Pokemon, the new fully evolved ones were Delphox, 2 forms of Meowstic, Malamar, and 2 forms for Hoopa. None of these would go on to make huge impacts, but Delphox does have the notable position of being the only Psychic type starter as of right now. Gen 6 introduced only 1 new Psychic move, a break from the trend of introducing tons of them, and it was a move that did not impact much of anything since it's a signature move for Hoopa. The Gen 6 Psychic Specialist was the Anastar City Gym Leader, Olympia. Gen 7 returned to the previous trend of adding a ton of new moves and a ton of new Pokemon. Alolan Raichu, Oricorio Pau style, Oranguru, Bruxish, Tapu Lele, Solgaleo, Lunala, and all 4 forms of Necrozma were the new fully evolved Psychic type Pokemon. In fact, the only new unevolved Psychic types were Cosmog and Cosmoem, the first legendary Pokemon to be able to evolve. Of all these, Tapu Lele would make the biggest competitive impact due to the terrain-centered metagame of Gen 7 doubles. There were quite a lot of new Psychic moves, but most of them were Z moves or signature moves. The only ones that were not were Psychic Fangs, Psychic Terrain, and Speed Swap. Psychic Fangs is the last regular physical Psychic move to be added, and provided an option for physical psychic damage for those Pokemon who could bite but could not cut or headbutt. Well, it did in Gen 8. Gen 7, only Bruxish got it. The Psychic Specialist was Faba, who is not a Gym Leader or Elite Four member, but still played a somewhat notable role in the story. Also, Bulbapedia lists Dexio. He has an even smaller role, but I guess he still counts. And finally, we get to Gen 8 Sword and Shield. This generation didn't do much for the Psychic type Pokemon, but notably added quite a lot of Psychic type regional forms. The new fully evolved Psychic Pokemon are Galarian Rapidash, Galarian Slowbro, Galarian Slowking, Galarian Articuno, Orbeetle, Hatterene, Mr. Rhyme, the 2 forms of Indeedee, and Calorex's 3 forms. Also, Galarian Mr. Mime is not fully evolved, but worthy of mentioning. The Orbeetle line is notable here because its introduction made it so Psychic type joined Water and Flying as being one of the few types to be paired with every single other type at least once. The Psychic type Gigantamax forms are Orbeetle and Hatterene. The new Psychic moves are once again mainly signature moves or max moves, the only exception being the Isle of Armor tutor move, Expanding Force. The Psychic specialists are Bede, who ends up as a Fairy specialist by the end of the main story, and Avery, the rival in Shield's Isle of Armor, who ends up becoming a minor league gym leader by the time of the Galarian Star Tournament in the Crown Tundra. Now that I've covered them all, I can say that according to Bulbapedia, the Psychic type has more notable type specialists than any other type, with 10 in total, 11 if you count Tate and Liza as 2. So in the end, the Psychic type was extremely overpowered, was knocked down several pegs in the next generation, and then has been pretty consistent since then, but seems to be a favorite of the devs due to all the Pokemon and moves they gave it. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to pick up a hat or a plushie at MandJTVmerch.com, and an extra special thanks to my patrons who are helping support my channel independent of fluctuating YouTube ad rates. If you want to help support me in the same way, the link is in the description below. Also, if you want to check out some more of my fun Pokemon content, I recommend these videos here. All right, that's all I have for now. So until next time, big fans, gotta catch them all.